What's going on, y'all? Welcome to Our Voice Podcast. I'm Neil Voles.
And I'm Desmond Meade, Executive Director of Florida Rights Restoration Coalition.
Man, this is round 2, Desmond.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
That first one was kind of good, man. You know, a little nervous, but I'm glad we was able to get through that, man. And here we are for round 2.
No, man, and it's been fun hearing people's reaction, people giving us suggestions on what to talk about. So, man, it's going to be good.
Yeah, you know what I'm most excited about, man, is that we are starting this new journey and where we're elevating the voices of people who've been impacted by the criminal justice system. You know, I put that in quotes, right?
I see that.
Some folks says injustice system, but folks, returning citizens, justice impacted individuals, this show is designed to elevate their voices. They are the subject matter experts, people who can speak about issues in a very real, authentic way. And so I'm excited, man, about this new journey we're on, bro.
Oh, man, I am too. And we're really fired up to partner with Fireside Chat, the app that this is running off of. Bit by bit, it's just going to get better and better, adding video and adding more platforms and be able to talk to more returning citizens and people impacted by the criminal justice system.
Right. Big shout out to the Fireside Chat app, folks.
What up, Fireside?
That's right. They've been giving us this platform to really help elevate the voices. Definitely appreciative of this partnership.
No, that's right. Yeah. I got to tell you, Des, this weekend, man, I was at 3 bus stops. You know, we got the Free the Vote bus tour, and it just kept reminding me about Amendment 4, going all across the state, talking to people. It's been a real journey, man. This is going to be a fun season where we keep talking about those issues. But it reminded me that I don't know that everybody knows the story of Amendment 4, like a little bit about like how it happened, what happened, and in chance you can throw a little bit of history out there so folks can get a better understanding where we're coming from.
Well, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and throw out a brief history. Amendment 4, and especially in Florida, once a person was convicted of a felony offense, they lost their civil rights for the rest of their lives, which included the right to serve on a jury, the right to run for office, the right to own a firearm, and the big daddy of them all, the right to vote. And, what we've seen was that the only way that a person was able to get any of their rights back was through the clemency process. So basically, you had to go up and you had to beg a handful of politicians for the right, to get your rights restored. Now, let me tell you, we were bad, but I got to put this in there. In Mississippi, it's even worse what you have to do. I mean, in Mississippi, an individual would have to get the entire state legislature on board just for them to be able to have their civil rights restored. In Florida, it was going through the governor and his cabinet, and that process was a pure arbitrary process. We've seen cases, man, where folks was like, they did everything right, and they still did not get their rights restored. And then there was a waiting period where people were waiting over 15 years to be able to have their civil rights restored, and something wasn't right with that. And, we definitely believe that no 4 politicians should have that much power to determine which American citizen get to vote and which American citizen don't get to vote. Now, we could have went after a whole lot of things, but we went after voting rights because, especially when it deals with issues that impact people with felony convictions, if you don't have the right to vote, it minimizes or diminishes your political capital, and therefore politicians don't have to address those issues, right? But what we've seen was that when folks started getting their right to vote and folks started getting more engaged, politicians really started taking notice to the criminal justice system. And as a matter of fact, one of our guests that's going to be on today, Norris Henderson, in the past, he talks about the sleeping giant awakening, right? And that sleeping giant are the voices of people who've been impacted by the justice system that was silenced for quite some time, but with the right to vote, with people getting the right to vote back, right, getting re-enfranchised, man, we are growing and becoming a force to be reckoned with.
Man, and I saw that play out. We had a stop in Jacksonville on Friday, and then we had a stop in Tallahassee. I saw both sides of that, where there are people registering to vote for the first time, realizing, hey, my voice matters. I matter in my community, and I got a say in the sheriff's race. I got a say in the judge's race. I got a say in the state attorney's race. Like, I can impact my community. And we see it in Jacksonville, where we're working with people who are trying to get employed. They're trying to get a job. There's lots of people out there trying to hire folks, but because there's barriers to employment, people are like, "Well, I can take my vote, and I can actually have an impact to help make people get jobs, which helps everybody."
Let me tell you, one of the things that I tell people all the time, Neil, is that there was one of the biggest displays of this growing power of returning citizens, right? We seen during the Super Bowl, right? Last year's Super Bowl, right? When, during the Super Bowl, those ads, man, you have to pay like millions of dollars to get an ad played during the Super Bowl. And at the time, President Trump, he bought an ad in the Super Bowl. Now,
so for millions of dollars,
for millions upon millions of dollars,
got one shot.
You got one shot to address like billions of people, because everybody's watching the Super Bowl, right? And mainly, you want to address all of the folks that's in the United States, right? You know what his ad was all about? It wasn't about the wall. It wasn't about immigration. It wasn't about the economy, right? You know what his Super Bowl ad was about?
Tell us.
Criminal justice reform. He put Miss Alice on there, talked about how, had her talking about how she was pardoned by Trump, and they was touting the First Step Act, right? And there's a lot of disagreement. There's a lot of back and forth about was the First Step Act really, effective, or was it built upon what the Obama administration had done previously? That's a whole new, a different topic to talk about. But what was important was that out of all the things that he could have picked, he chose to pick an issue that was directly related to people who've been impacted by the justice system, and that was a clear testament of the power, the growing power of people with felony convictions, especially when they're getting the right to vote back.
You know what? There's nothing more clear than how some elected official is trying to communicate to people, because they do all their research, all that polling. They're like, oh, well, who do we need to talk to? And they're clearly talking to this second chance constituency that came alive because of Amendment 4 here in this state.
They have to, and you've seen, matter of fact, our guest Norris that we're going to bring on in a second. He did some amazing work with his organization in the state of Louisiana, where I believe around like 70,000 people were able to get the rights restored, right? But here's the thing. I'm going to reel us back in, because one of the issues that impacts people with felony convictions, right, that now we can have a say in, is incarceration, right? I remember when I was sentenced in 2001. I was sentenced to 15 years, right? And thank God I didn't have to do that amount of time. But when I was released and I was going to school and I was pursuing a bachelor's in public safety management with a concentration in criminal justice, I actually did a research project using myself as a subject, right? Looking at those 15 years, and at the time, the cost of housing a person in prison was around $18,000, right? And I looked at, wow, did I really need to be sentenced to 15 years? I was convicted of possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. And basically, it was a firearm that was found in the home that I was living in. Not in my room or anything, but just in the home. And because I had a previous felony conviction, that they put the gun on me, right? And I had to serve 15 years.
15 years. That's human years, man. Think about that.
For what, right? And then what I looked at, right, was when I looked at the cost to society, right, along with the cost to me, that public dollars, right, taxpayers' dollars, right, had to be spent to house me in these prisons. So over $270,000, right? The state of Florida would have had to pay to house me in it for what? Right? Come for what? And so I think, in this episode, we want to talk about, incarceration. We want to talk about what's the purpose of it, right?
That's right.
And what does it seek to accomplish, and who's benefiting and who's not benefiting.
That's right.
From these crazy. I think we have another guest.
Well, I was just going to say we got Alina, who's a guest after talking to Norris, and we're going to talk about this.
Yeah.
And she's in a situation in which, because of COVID, she was actually sent home so that she could serve her time there. And now there's a situation where she might have to go back and ask the question, well, wait a minute, if you've reintegrated with the community, with your family, you're doing the things that you're supposed to be doing, why in the world would somebody need to be sent back, right? It goes,
who benefits from that?
No, that's the question.
Benefits,
that's the
right?
question.
Maybe people that profit off of people being incarcerated, but nobody else benefits. But listen, without any further delay, we definitely want to bring on our first guest, Mr. Norris Henderson. Norris is the executive director of VOTE, Voice of the Experience, right? And VOTE is a wildly successful organization that's led by directly impacted people. Norris is a champion for democracy. He's a champion for criminal justice reform. And best of all, he's my mentor, my friend, my colleague. Let me bring Norris on. Norris, what's up?
Y'all, man, I've just been listening, man. Y'all hyping this thing up, bro. I hope I can live up to the hype, bro.
Oh, man, we're grateful that you joined us, Norris, because, man, Norris, you're showing the way. You're leading the way. You're showing what's possible when this sleeping giant wakes up, man.
So, Norris.
I think the sleeping giant that woke up in Florida, bro.
And you sure played a role in that too, bro. Listen, I want to get right into it, man, because even though this is an hour-long podcast, man, time flies, right? And so I want to just jump in first. And could you give us a very brief history of VOTE, particularly where did it actually start?
Well, VOTE actually got started, man, while I was in prison. VOTE is actually the progeny of the Angola Special Civics Project. We, during the late 70s, early 80s, when these prisons were kind of like exploding all over the country, that somebody was predicting that Angola was going to be the worst prison ride in this country's history. And so we're sitting there kind of like looking at each other, trying to figure out, well, ain't nobody gave us that memo. But all the conditions for this kind of situation was present. There were mass suicides. There were, staff on people in custody deaths, and vice versa. I mean, Angola at one time was known as the bloodiest prison in America. And so when people are talking about this, we kind of like start looking at each other, and we have a choice to make. We could do one or two things. One, we could kind of like change our conditions by setting the place on fire, or we can change our circumstances. And we chose the latter. And we chose the latter for two reasons. One, we didn't want to be kind of like caught up in a situation, or no-win situation, because mostly that's what the uprisings were amounting to, people getting harmed and hurt. But we also realized that where we was at was an 18,000-acre farm. And it wasn't like, we burned the place down where we lived at. They could have moved us 5 miles in any direction, and we wouldn't even saw the ruins that we had created.
Yeah.
And so the vast majority of us were jailhouse lawyers. We either worked in the law library or we were just freelance jailhouse lawyers. And we collectively came together to kind of start working on some proposals, looking at what this stuff looks like in other states. And we chose 10 different states that we looked at to kind of like start doing this work. And we actually drafted a document that we call Analysis of Louisiana Sentencing and Parole Laws Governing Long-Termers and Lifers. Because the vast majority of our prison population at that time had started to turn over real quick. And we became from a population where there were folks going home that we became almost a lifeless colony. of the 5,000 people inside the prison. At this point, like 3,500 of them were serving life. The other ones had practical life, and what I mean by practical life, that they had more than 30 flat years.
But Norris, let me ask you real quick. What type of sentence was you serving?
Oh, I had a life sentence also. And just about everybody who was a part of the project was serving life, or they had a practical life. The guys who had 9 homicides, they had armed robbery charges where they had 99 years, or they had 198 years, which in reality is a life sentence. Just on kind of like the installment plan, you can look at the calendar and kind of like fool yourself that maybe one day I'm gonna get out. But whereas with the lifer, lifer didn't own calendars. Calendars had no relevance to folks serving life. So we put together this proposal, man, under the auspices of we're going to raise people awareness about what is going on in Louisiana. And so we crafted this document. We looked at, far-reaching states. We looked at Alaska. We looked at Hawaii.
Yeah.
We looked at Maryland, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Montana, Ohio.
You didn't look at Florida?
No. We didn't look at Florida. We looked at Oregon and Texas.
Okay.
And what we wanted to do, we were looking at trying to draw an analogy from the type of crimes that were being committed in our state and the sentences that were doled out as compared to what the same punishment would be, what the sentence would be if I was in another state.
And what did you find?
And we were shocked. Oh, we were shocked, man, that we were an outlier. That we were literally an outlier. The only thing that we had going for us over other states was that the previous governor that we had during the time we was doing all of this was a guy who would actually grant pardons. He was a guy that was, shy away from signing pardons. So a lot of stock was put into that. But a lot of other things that where we feel tremendously in. I mean, in Alaska, if you had from 1 to 20 years, you did a 30-year sentence. If you was in Louisiana, you didn't have no parole at all. And so these were the odds that we were dealing with, looking at different things. Even with our neighbor, Mississippi, they did 10 years. Texas, they did 15 years. And so, go ahead.
So, Norris, this is like a galvanizing moment, right? Right? You're sitting there going like, holy shit, look at what's going on here and how we compare and how we're an outlier.
Yeah, Raleigh should have said.
Right?
Okay,
right?
Yeah,
so what'd you do?
Well, one of the things we started doing was we kind of, after we put this proposal together, we kind of put this white paper together, what we literally did was we got lucky. I put it that way. And I don't believe in luck, because luck is preparation beating opportunity. What happened was we were able to invite people inside the prison. And unbeknownst to me, at one of our LIFA meetings, we had some outside guests. One of the outside guests was a newly elected state representative. And so I'm giving this whole spiel, man, about, hey, guys, look, here's the proposal we drafted. Why? The next thing is we got to get somebody to introduce this legislation for us in the legislature. And like I said, again, unbeknownst to me, this person was sitting in the audience. And when I got finished speaking, they asked, could they have, a few minutes to speak? And I'm like, okay, sure. And then when she introduced herself, she said, my name is Naomi White Warren. I am the newly elected official out of New Orleans. And I will introduce y'all legislation for y'all. We were like, oh, man, holy smoke, we got it going on right now,
What year was this, Norris?
This was like 1987.
Okay.
Come on.
1987. And so we kind of like kept moving forward with that and, being kind of like naive ourselves. And what it was, we just assumed that was it, man. Ball game over. We got this thing done. The bill didn't get out of the House committee.
Wow.
And what it did was it dampens the hopes and aspirations, man, of a lot of people. People kind of like got, I mean, both of y'all have been on the inside, so y'all know what that's like. And so we just kept pushing, So the next year, the legislature said, I'm going to keep doing this until it happens.
What year did it eventually pass, Norris?
1990. In 1990. We didn't have to wait long.
So in 1990, it passed, right? Now, let me ask you a question. When were you released from Angola?
2003.
All right.
So
that's
87 to 90 to 2003.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's when we just started to work. I was in the prison from 75. I mean, this is when all the work started,
So let me back up and make sure I got this right. You was incarcerated from 1975 to 2009.
2003.
2003. Okay. Now, and then could you tell me like two programs that you all started in Angola that was beneficial to the people who were incarcerated there?
Well, one of them, and kind of funny you asked that question because I was just talking to somebody earlier that we created a hospice program. And we created a hospice program more out of necessity than anything else. A lot of our guys, because of the conditions that we were living in, and we was under consent decree this whole while. We was under consent decree from 1972. We've been under consent decree. And so we're under consent decree, and we have these long, exhaustive sentences that nobody can outlive. And so people are getting old and dying. And one of the problems was that one of the policies surrounding the hospital was that you couldn't visit people but for 15 minutes. So if I got sick, went to the hospital, one of y'all wanted to come see me, if you got permission to come see me, you couldn't visit me for 15 minutes.
Wow.
And we just thought that was kind of like completely unfair for somebody to be in an environment with somebody who has actually become family now, who you've been in prison with for decades. I can't go see him but for 15 minutes and he's dying.
Yeah.
And so the hospice concept was introduced to us from some folks outside.
Well,
and,
Norris,
we took it to another level.
Hey, Norris, we've spent time together. I remember you talking to me about the hospice, and you used the language. You were like, man, we're just sick of seeing people die by themselves, right? And what a lot of folks, maybe on this podcast, people get it, but elsewhere, the visual of, man, people loving somebody enough to say, I'm going to be with that person in their last days. And the time, I remember you talking about how long it took to get approval and move forward on that. But then the quality that happened is that the standards that were kept in that hospice are top of the line, right? Do I have all that right?
Yeah. Well done, bro. We became the best hospice program, bar none. And I'm not talking about prison hospice program. I'm talking about hospice program in America, bar none.
Wow.
Because
that's tight work.
One thing to tell people about hospice is not a job. Hospice is a calling. So when people take on this role, it's like Neil was saying earlier, is that I remember one of my patients, Simon, was somebody I grew up with, somebody I've been knowing since I was like 13 years old. And he took sick.
Yeah.
And he in the hospital, and one day I'm in the hospital visiting another patient, and he wasn't a hospice patient as of yet. He was sick, but he hadn't entered the hospice.
Yeah.
And I went into his room to talk to him. While I was talking to him, I'm like, I know it was realizing it was getting kind of late in the day. And I'm like, hey, man, have you had your bath and stuff yet? He said, no, man, they ain't got around to me yet. I said, well, you want me to give you a bath? And he just looked at me in some kind of way.
Wow.
And he was like, bro, you gonna give me a bath? I said, yeah, I'm gonna give you a bath, bro, And so it's kind of like how we started breaking down all these barriers, man, around, being in an all-male environment and how men are real protective about their privacy and stuff like that.
But Norris, I think, so I think, Norris, you actually touch on something very important and relevant to this conversation, right? Because here we are, you're talking about an institution like Angola, where some reports said it was one of the bloodiest, most dangerous penal institutions in the country, right? And you have this concept that folks have about people who are incarcerated as like they're like less than human or they're bad, evil people. But the one place where we saw compassion in display, right, that rivals any other place in the country was in the prison, and it was actually done by people who were incarcerated, right? Now, I think that is so important because it talks about the humanity. And when we're going to be talking to Alina later on, and we're talking about, well, why do we incarcerate people? What do we hope to accomplish from incarcerating people, right? And if we could shift the mindset of people that it's not animals that you're putting behind bars, right? And understanding the issues with solitary confinement, the prison conditions or whatever, it's not something to just gloss over. This is real. And so when you are people, you have to make an analysis. Do we really need to put human beings in conditions like that? And for what, right? And then when we release them, do we make them come back? Like, we're going to talk about later on. And so, but Norris, I want to like just jump forward a little bit, because anytime I have an opportunity to sit down with you and chop it up, one of my favorite stories, and I know that we're running out of time, but I got to get this thing out, because one of the things that this podcast is about is lifting up the voices of returning citizens, right? And the other thing is, in doing so, showing people across the country about the power that we have as people who've been impacted by the justice system, right? Or injustice system. I want you to, I want to go back and forth with you about my favorite story about when you were released, and the lady attorney who was working on the case to help you get released decided she wanted to run for judge. You remember that story?
Yeah. I mean, that's the part of my Bible. I mean, I helped somebody in prison get out, and when the person got out, one of the things we made commitments, is that, hey, bro, don't forget me, bro, and so this guy was a boxer while he was inside. He got out, he kind of like made the Olympic team, and he was doing Olympic trials that the lawyer who owned the boxing club asked him whether somebody he wanted to help. And he said, yeah, me, a friend of mine is coming back to court. He appreciate if you help him.
And that was you.
So she showed up. That was me. And so she showed up at court. I'm at a court hearing. This is 1990. I filed this, got in court. She shows up and tells the judge that she signed on as counsel record. And then she explained to me, who she was. Her name was Lori White. I'm a criminal defense lawyer, And Isaac asked me to help you. And so we kind of like started this journey that lasted for 13 years. Now, mind me, she represented me pro bono.
So she didn't charge you a dime. She represented you, right?
For 13 years.
Right. And
13 years.
And eventually she was able to work with you and win your release, right?
That's exactly.
Now, I guess a few years later, she ran for office, right? She decided she wanted to be a judge, right?
Right. Well, in between that, I mean, she had grand plans. Part of her plan was to get me out for me to come work for her. And so she actually had a job. She actually had a job in our office waiting for me for 10 years, man. And then when she finally got me out, I went to work for her as a paralegal. And, with all lawyers, they aspire to want to move up the food chain. And up the food chain for lawyers is mostly either legislative or judicial. So she wanted to be a judge.
Was she the underdog?
She was, not only was she the underdog, New Orleans is predominantly, Afro-American community.
Wait, hold up. I know you about to go there. This is one of the stories I love the most, bro. So you're saying that she wanted to run for office in a predominantly African-American community, right?
Right.
And she was what?
White. She's white.
She was white.
She's white.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we kind of like, okay, that's what you want to do. The least I can do is to kind of like help. And so we started on this campaign, and we made the runoff. We made the runoff.
Well, hold on. Let's back up for a minute. Let's back up. You made a couple calls inside the Angola, didn't you?
Well, I'm going to tell you that
Okay.
piece. I'm going to tell you that piece.
Okay.
And I like watching you guys tell this story together. This is fun.
Because I'm telling you, I listen. This is a very powerful story.
Yeah, it is, bro. It is. And I mean, that's been the success of our success throughout.
Yep.
And so, when this story emanates with, okay, she wanted to be judged, and was like, okay, cool. And so it's like, trying to kind of like sell this person in the community. Was kind of like wasn't challenging because she had done good works in the community. But I became that bright and shiny object. This is the person that got Norris out of prison. And, I used to be kind of like one of the jokes inside the prison in the sense that, well, you can get everybody out of prison and can't get yourself out.
Yeah. So,
and I used to say, well, when that time comes, I'm going to get out. But fast forward, anyway, the campaign is going. The campaign is going. And so we maced the runoff. It's kind of like a crowded field. But we maced the runoff.
So you get down to final two, right? Last two running?
Yeah, last two. But we down 3,000 votes.
Okay.
Right? Now, we down 3,000 votes.
Okay.
And mostly in the runoff, nobody shows up for these elections. So our strength actually was built from being inside out.
Okay.
I mean, when we first started the Civic Project, it was like, hey, bro, we need to organize our family and friends to vote as a voting bloc.
Yeah.
And how do we do that? We do that because we educate them from the inside out.
Yep.
And so what I did was, because I had access, I started going back inside the prison. Hey, man, check this out, bro. Laurie is running for judge, and I need y'all help. I need y'all to help me help her. And so I got all my friends inside throughout corrections to get on the phone and start calling their families and friends and say, hey, look, check this out. This woman is the real deal. That's who got Norris out. That's who got Norris out. That's who got Norris out.
Norris. So I kind of tell a story a little bit differently here, bro. I'm gonna let you know that. So basically, how I tell it is that when the folks on the inside called out to their family, they were like, "Mama, I know she white, but she one of us. She got Norris. I know she white."
That was a part of it too. That was a part of it because someone was saying, "Well, she runs against this black lady."
There you go.
You go. So what? They kept saying to their folks, "It's like, hey, mama, all skin folks ain't kin folks."
Well, listen, here's the other thing. And Norris, and so I love this. One of the reasons I love this part because even with Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, right? We always say, listen, we don't lean left, we don't lean right, we lean straight forward into the issues that impact people with felony convictions, and we are willing to rock with anyone who are bold enough to address the issues that impact people who've been impacted by our justice system.
Right.
Point blank.
Right.
We don't owe allegiance to anyone but the individuals who are fighting for our issues, fighting for our cause. And so when your people was like, "Mama, I know she white, right? And I know this is an all-black district and she's running against this black woman," at the end of the day, people rallied around the people who showed up for them, right? And she showed up for you for 13 years, right? Didn't charge you a dime because everybody else said, "Oh, Norris is going to be there for the rest of his life. He's going to die in prison." But here you are out. You were going to be in prison using taxpayers' dollars, right? When you could have been out here in the community and look at all of the stuff that you've done to improve the lives of so many people. And that's the difference between being incarcerated, being out there in the real world as well, man. But anyway, so your people called, right? What happened? What happened at the end?
And so when it came to runoff, we won. We won. But it's not so much that we won, but we literally won by 10,000 votes.
Ooh, hell on. Wait, back up. Back up, Norris. Back up, Norris. She was down by 3,000 and y'all won by 10,000?
And we won by 10. So you're talking about a 13,000 vote turnaround.
The power of people who've been impacted.
Because the thing
Yep.
was, nobody saw that. Nobody saw that voting block.
Yeah.
The sleeping giant, man.
That's the sleeping giant. You know, I tell folks that people are so fixated on the 1.4 million people that they totally forget about the 5.6 million plus people who are family members and friends of those individuals.
No,
Right?
that's exactly right.
And so it's a much bigger ecosystem. Yeah, yes, it is.
And here's a snapshot of that. I mean, I'm just going to give you a snapshot. Angola, 5,000, well, you got 6,000 people there now, Angola. All right? Everybody got 10 people on their business list, which equates to 60,000.
60,000.
All right?
Yes.
Then they got 20 people on their telephone list, which equates to 120,000.
That's 120,000.
So just those contacts inside, some of them may be cross-pollinated.
All right.
But you're talking about at maximum 180,000 people.
Norris, we ain't gonna get it. We ain't gonna get that detail. Not now. Listen, you can't give all the ingredients to the gumbo, bro. Listen, let's get to the point. And this is the part that gave me chills. Right? You actually attended the ceremony that she was sworn in as judge, right?
Yeah.
You were there, and you had a present for her, right?
Yes,
What was it? What was that present, and what did you say when you gave her that present?
The present was actually a handmade gavel that was made inside the prison carpentry shop.
Oh Jesus! I'm getting goosebumps again. Goosebumps.
The metal, the engraving on the gavel was, "This is from your friends who couldn't be here."
Wow.
And to see the faces of all these other judges who were sitting there at this investiture kind of like signaled to me in that moment that the game has just changed.
It's changed. And what did you say to her, man? Because I might have been misquoting you all these years. What did you say to this judge?
No, this, again, it's like, these are from your friends. These are from your friends who couldn't be here.
So, let me tell you something. So I may have misquoted you. I'm going to tell you how I told the story. Another piece of it was that when you handed her that gavel, right, you said, "Remember who got you here. Rule justly."
Right.
I remember that.
That's all we did. Yes. And and the thing about it, Desmond, she just got reelected to a third term.
Wow.
So she's been on the bench almost the whole length of the time I've been on. I've been on 18 years, and she's literally been on the bench just about 17 and some change.
Okay, so here's the deal. Unless there's a statutory requirement, then the judge is the person that determines how long someone is incarcerated, right?
Yeah.
So, therefore, one of the ways that we can address inequities in incarceration and sentencing, right, is no longer to just cry about it and cry to deaf ears. We could actually elect the judges that have that power to determine how long we are incarcerated.
Yeah, and let me jump into that, because right on that theme right there in terms of addressing the inequities.
Yes.
Norris, we're wondering if you could stay on the line with us, because we actually got somebody here who we wanted to talk about something going on right here, right now, something I know you know about, which is that there's thousands of people all across the country who during COVID, during the Trump administration, were released. And they're living with loved ones in a halfway house. And now we're looking at a situation where it's possible that they're going to have to go back. And there's this whole campaign about keep them home that gets to the crux of the issue that Desmond was just talking about. Like, why are people being incarcerated? Why are we doing this to people? What's going on? What's the goal here? And we've actually got a woman from Miami who is currently living with her family and is not sleeping every single night because she knows that it's possible that at any moment she might be sent back to prison. And we'd love it if you join us, if you could, to talk to Alina.
Could you hang out for us?
I hang around, yeah, for sure. Man.
All right.
Come on with that food.
Hey, so do we have Alina on the line? Okay, we're gonna call her. And while we're Norris, man, let me thank you. I can't thank you enough, really, for being on. And there's just so much, man. We need matter of fact, you know what, Norris, we got to bring you back and let you co-host with Neil or myself or whatever, bro. because you got, man, it's so much you could talk about, man.
Well, and Norris, we didn't even get a chance to talk about how we dominated Desmond at paintball, man. We thought that was going to come up, but
wait.
Let me tell you this story.
Hold up.
You didn't put a spin on that story.
Hey,
Neil.
so
You talking about you showing us mercy because we were AAR.
you have to understand that Florida has some very strict laws around what you can do to elderly people. And I was not about to get back in trouble. And so therefore I could not, you know what I'm saying, just go all in on you older folks.
That's some good stuff there. Team AARP 1 is all I know.
That's all I do.
Yeah.
We walked away. What we walked away and say, have you not been entertained?
That's exactly right.
So listen,
that's beautiful.
Listen, we don't have time for all this shenanigans right now, right? This is a very serious podcast here, Norris. Right? We're talking about a serious subject right now. Right? So we'll have time for that. Do we have Alina on now? All right. Let's see if we can bring her on the line.
Oh,
all right.
There we go.
I love when I hear phone ringing. As long as I don't hear
Hello.
Alina,
it's Neil and Desmond. How are you doing? You're on the air.
Hi, how are you? Yeah, oh my God, you wanted me to start talking without calling me?
We just roll crazy with our podcast. You know, we're just going and flowing. It's great to hear your voice.
Oh, well, I'm a mayor.
Alina, how are you today?
Good, I'm good. What about you?
Well, listen, we're hanging in there. You know, we were just having some discussions about, incarceration and, what's the value of incarceration to society or the people, and whether we should be rethinking our attitudes in incarceration. And Neil talked about your story. And so I want you to, if you can, just briefly, could you at least let our listeners and our viewers know who you are? What's going on with you right now?
Well, currently I'm in home confinement. My name is Alina Fias. I'm 62 years old already. And I have been in home confinement under the CARES Act since last May 14, 2020. We are talking about 15 months. I have been doing, what I'm supposed to do, and following everything, doing everything. And now with this OLC memo that is going on, that everybody that is under the CARES Act has to go back to prison, everything, has turned around. And, I feel like my world is upside down again.
Wow.
It's like, wow. I'm going back to 2013 when I was, indicted in January. And then when I have to go to prison, and that feeling of being separated from my family is, it's dominating me for months.
Wow. Neil, Neil, could you just give our listeners a brief overview of the CARES Act so folks can really understand, what's going on here?
Yeah. So the CARES Act was a piece of legislation that was a response to COVID, right? And so it included provisions that allowed people, kind of like Alina, to be able to be released, and sent home to a halfway house, to something that basically said, look, for health purposes, and because, these folks we've looked at, we think it's best in their best interest and the best interest of everybody to send somebody home. And that's where Alina is right now, 15 months, right, Alina?
So, 15 months.
So let me get this right, Alina, if I have it right. So the Trump administration released you 15 months ago, and now we're in a situation where it's possible that the Biden administration might ask you to go back.
Right. Correct.
So Norris was part of the movement that helped spurn the CARES Act. Norris, could you give us some kind of a feedback as to what was the basis of this movement, or what was that narrative that you and so many others across the country was trying to put out there as it relates to incarceration and COVID?
Well, the basic narrative was when CDC came out with their guidelines about what's the word I'm looking for?
Pre-existing conditions?
Pre-existing conditions, social distancing. Well, we kind of like start amping it up because you can't social distance inside of prison. No shape, form, or fashion. And so when some people started hearing, we started kind of like pushing the envelope, but don't need to start letting these people out who have these preconditions, start letting them out of prison. And it wasn't with the intention that when you get better, you go back. Mm-hmm. Because, COVID is still around. So this kind of like mindset of sending people back to prison is like, that's not making common sense. Because now you want to put them back into an environment, and just like Alina was saying, it's like the stress that she's probably going through right now. I was kind of like just being stressful listening at her, saying, one, that I've been home since last May, and it's like, I got to make preparations on a moment's notice to go back to prison. How do you do that? You don't do that. Just like being out on bond, really, you're kind of like waiting for your sentencing date. It's almost like you get into that mentality of catch and come through hanging, But it's not fair, first and foremost. It's not fair. And I think with the pressures that's being put on the Biden administration right now, about this, they've already reversed course with one person already that actually gave that woman commuted her sentence. Mm-hmm. And I think it's going to happen across the board because in a time and a place where this variant is starting to take a life of its own, when people are not doing what they should do to help, mm-hmm. it would be really disingenuous and really morally mm-hmm. corrupt to start asking people to go back to prison, to be in a kind of like incubator, so to speak. I mean, we've lost on this end, we had a lot of in-prison deaths from COVID. Yes. The federal system right here in Oakdale, Louisiana, was the first big outbreak that caused the CARES Act to come into being. And to kind of like go back against it because some other administration put it in place, it's kind of like ass backwards to me. But if anything, we need to be identifying other people that we can kind of like let out.
That's because right.
Of that.
So let me throw a different perspective on here, right? One that's probably contrary to this approach, right? Mm-hmm. And so we know that we've been talking about how this being able to release people during COVID really shows that maybe we need to rethink how we're incarcerating people to begin with. Right. But we got two things that's going on here, right? Number one, there's this supposedly rise in crime, right? And then you have the fear that politicians have that if they release someone and that person, like Willie Horton.
That's right.
Right? That you release somebody and then they go and do something bad, then that's the end of their political career, right?
Right. They think that one of these 4,000 people might do something, and 10 years later they're going to lose their career. Yeah. That's how they're judging.
So how do you respond to that, Neil, Alina, Norris? I mean, you guys go at me. I'm that guy. I'm Joe Biden right now, and I'm saying, listen, I'm sending people back because the one thing I don't want under my presidency is for one out of 4,000 people to go and rob a bank or to go to do something bad, because I would never be able to recover from it. So I'd rather play it safe and send everybody back. Respond to me.
Well, my response would be that I'm one of those guys. I'm one of those people you're talking about. Matter of fact, our success during the work that we've been doing is because we've been able to tell our story and move our stories to action. So when we were talking about long-termers and lifers, I was able to say I was one of those long-termers and lifers. But how you like me now? And it's kind of like, okay, now I get it. So this is what it looks like, a person who's done long-term incarceration. It's not no boogeyman or anything. So I think the more we humanize people, the easier it comes for people to kind of move. It's kind of like I take what you say all the time, Desmond. We got to change people's hearts and minds.
Yeah, and I got to say,
Good, yeah.
Yeah, my view would be, I'd like to hear what Alina has to say.
I was about to say, I want Alina. Alina, I'm President Biden right now. I want you to tell me what's your thoughts about my position there. What do you want me to know?
Well, first of all, I'm one of them. I'm one of the almost 4,000 people that are at risk to go back to prison. I'm a low-level custody. I have been at home for 15 months. I have proven that I can be living in society again. So what else I need to do to prove myself? You know, if the goal of the justice is for me to be reintegrated into society, I'm already done. You know, I'm done.
Right. So if the goal is to reintegrate, you're reintegrated.
Exactly. I have been home for 15 months, and because what happens is the public don't understand that most of the people that are in home confinement under the CARES Act have been served after the sentences. It's not that everybody's out just because whatever, you know. In my case, I have been, when I was released, I was way past half of my sentences.
Wow.
You know, because I had a lot of medical conditions, and I was one of the first, of course, to qualify. They called me and they released me. They called me in April and they released me in May. And because I already served half of my sentences. And then if people are, you know, I know I have less time than a lot of people in home confinement, but let's say a person that is going to be released from BOP 9 years from now and is in home confinement for a year, that means that person was in prison for more than 10 years. And now it's ready to be in the society. So why are you going to be sending this person back?
Wow. So she said, Alina said something that's so important, because I was actually doing a little research before the call of this podcast. And one of the things that I've seen is the sentencing disparity in the United States as opposed to other countries.
That's right. That's right.
And so what you get like 10 years for in the United States, in another country, maybe you get like 6 months or something like that, right? And
Absolutely.
we are so, like, we exasperate the sentence. We just exponentially sentence folks, right? Thinking, oh yes, we got to be tough on crime. We've got to lock them up. And when you look at the crime rates per capita in the developed countries, we got the worst ones. And so locking people up is not the answer to reducing crime. It's actually addressing the issues, the systems that create those conditions. And so how do we address poverty? How do we address racism? How do we address these things that create conditions in which people commit crime? And so we create the conditions that make it likely for somebody to do something wrong. And then when they do something wrong, we punish them like 10 times more than anyone else would.
Well,
right?
And Desmond,
it's crazy.
And we do have somebody who has a question from the audience. But to your question, Desmond, about what to say to President Biden, I'm listening to you talk, I'm listening to Alina talk, and it's like, in a cooler-headed moment, right, the promises get made when you're on the campaign trail. Right? So it's like, hey, I'm going to promise to reduce incarceration by half. Right. So when somebody says, I'm going to promise, hear me out. Because I want to make that promise. But then it's possible that I could turn around and have the largest one-day increase in federal incarceration ever. What does that say to people? Like this campaign to me has become a litmus test for commitment around criminal justice reform.
Well, Neil, ask me what you be Biden. Ask me what I'll say to you.
Hey, Desmond Meade, I am President Biden. I made these commitments, and this is my fear that I don't want to let somebody out because of the blah blah blah.
Well, you know what I would say? I would say, President Biden. Let me tell you something, right? I got a friend named Alina. Right on. That's been out 15 months, 16 months, haven't done anything, right? And the center backers would be inhumane. But President Biden, more than anything, you have an opportunity right now, right? You have an opportunity right now to make your mark in history because you, right, was instrumental in passing this 94 crime bill that caused a lot of harm.
Oh, he
right?
did. He
and
did.
This is one of the ways that you can start to repair that harm. You can make your mark right now, right? Acknowledging the harm that you caused, because guess what? A lot of folks that are incarcerated that came out is because of the over-exaggeration of prison sentences, the dehumanizing of people, and creating this illusion that we're animals and we're not worthy of being treated with dignity and respect, and we're forced to be in conditions where we, matter of fact, even during COVID, right, the majority, there's a higher percentage of people with pre-existing conditions that makes them more likely to die from COVID in prison, right? And you help create that condition. So therefore, this is your moment to show that you are truly sincere, right, about the errors that you made in this 94
So if
crime
I'm
bill.
still President Biden, what I'm saying, I'm hearing is
Man
like,
up.
I helped create the narrative that
Yep.
I'm afraid of to
Yep.
move in the first place.
There you go. Now I tell you to man up.
Come on.
Man up.
All right.
Because let me tell you, and here's the maybe controversial thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. People can say a lot about Trump, but President Trump, when he was, he did whatever the hell he thought he needed to do. Right? And he can give a damn about the consequences. And so when it comes time to righting your own wrong, man up and don't care about the consequences because you helped create those conditions. So therefore, you should be committed to righting the wrong.
That's right.
Man up.
Come on.
Exactly.
Oh, that's powerful.
Exactly. He cannot think about consequence because this is consequence of whatever he has done in the past.
What you say, Norris?
So,
Am I too rough on President?
No, because there should be some reciprocity in this thing. You know, one of the things about they always tell us to ask people apologize for what you've done or seek forgiveness for what you've done. Here's an opportunity for him not only to seek forgiveness, but he can extend some grace to people. You know, one of the things about being in this position that he's in a position of power. Yeah. Don't wait till the end of your term to kind of like start. You know what's wrong. You were the part of this apparatus.
That's right.
Hey, I remember when
you know it. So here's the time now to kind of like, okay, I'm in a position now. I can rectify all those wrongs I've done. The harm I came into the home, but I can kind of like start mending fences.
Yeah.
You know, start tearing down walls and building bridges. You know what I'm saying? Give an opportunity for him to actually do just that. Everybody that's already home, stay home. And you know what? I'm trying to find y'all some company because I'm about to let out a whole bunch of lawyers.
Like it or not, when President Trump was first elected, one of the first things he did was pardon the sheriff appeal, right?
Yep.
Right. Like it or not, this guy, he made moves. And if our brother Dorsey was on there, one of the first things he would be saying is a whole bunch of political prisoners that's been languishing in prison, right? And this president has the power and authority to release people from prison. We've shown Alina is an example that there are people who are incarcerated that don't need to be incarcerated. And if we don't incarcerate them, guess what that means? That means you're saving hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayers' dollars that instead of spending it on incarcerating people that don't need to be incarcerated, you could be spending it on teachers' salary, right? Paying the hell out of teachers so they'll be able to do their job. You could be spending it on healthcare. You could be spending it on infrastructure, right? You could be doing so many other things.
Come on, man. I got to get that flag out and start waving that around. Hey, team, how do I get Kate on here? Because she's got a question for Alina.
Okay.
Kate, can you go ahead?
Kate, you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, you got to unmute yourself,
Can you
Kate.
hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Kate, where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Miami.
Miami, which is where Alina's from. All right.
Awesome.
All right. Down there in Cali Ocho.
Yeah, that's not where I am, but yeah.
I'm in Westchester.
Oh, great. I'm in Kendall.
All right.
Oh, we're close.
So what's your question, Kate?
So I read Alina's op-ed and was really moved by it, but I had a question for her on some of kind of the things she said in it. And so At the beginning, Alina, you described that your offense was, a first-time offense, nonviolent, white collar. And then at the end, and I really appreciated this, you said we all deserve second chances. So as we are pushing the Biden administration to do more, I would love to hear from you and Norris. How do we advocate for not just the first time, and this was your language, so first time nonviolent white collar offenses, people with other types of offenses, how do they get meaningful access to release? Thank you.
And I think this is where, again, the president plays a part, because the false narrative that they use to put a lot of people in prison was built around those predators and stuff like that. Folks wind up in prison. And so the reality of it was that in spite of what a person may or may not have been charged with, if you're going to be the king, so to speak, to kind of like issue, this is a situation of David and Solomon. David had knowledge and Solomon had wisdom. And so the story of the dispute about the child, when Solomon said, well, I'm going to split the baby, and the mother stepped up and said, no, let her have it. Then he understood then that only a mother would do that. And so this is the same thing. Although folks may have offended somebody, at some point in time, one of my friends always said, man, if your kid do something and you tell him to go to his room, do you intend on him to stay there forever? I think not.
Yeah.
And I think we need to kind of like change this narrative about when is enough enough. Yeah. The fact of one thing we was talking earlier about when you were saying if you were the president, I was like, no, Mr. President, what would you gain by sending me back to prison? Exactly. What is the gain? Is the community going to be even more safe? I'm in my house on house arrest. Is I'm a threat to anything, anybody? I think not. And so I think some of these kind of like hard questions need to be asked of people that people around them sometimes want to ask, but for various reasons are afraid to ask or even speak on. But the whole thing is, what would it benefit this country to send this lady back to prison? Or in the other thousands of people that were let out? What is the benefit?
That's powerful, Norris. That is powerful. What is the benefit to this country of sending thousands of people back to prison? Man, that's powerful, Norris. Alina, how about yourself? How do you respond to that question?
Well, what is the benefit? There is no benefit at all.
Or the question that Kate asked. Sorry about that. The question that Kate asked based off of your the editorial you wrote.
What was the question again? I'm sorry.
How do we get restoration for everybody? You had outlined kind of first time white collar, and there's a certain narrative around that. But in your own words, you said, "Hey, restoration is for everybody," right? How do we get on the pathway to that?
Well, I think the first thing that this country needs to do is stop waterhousing people. And every crime. Let's say we have to be abiding the law, but at the same time, you have to measure what was the crime. And we are not treating as human when we have to face federal court. In federal court, we are a number. It doesn't matter the amount of, the crime that you committed. It doesn't matter that you have been an abiding citizen for your entire life. It's just you are a number. They give you a number, and you're going to be sensitive for that number. And we are humans. We are not numbers. We have faces. We have, I think the system, the system is totally broken. It's a punitive system. And, in my opinion, it doesn't work. I was 7 years in prison. I was sentenced to 135 months, which is 11 years and 3 months. And I was sitting in that prison doing absolutely nothing. Okay, I was involved in a lot of things, to help others, to help me pass the time. But in reality, in that place, it was not anything special, for me. Nothing at all. Yeah, I was helping others. But, my crime was nothing to do with being waterhousing for 11 years, doing nothing.
Well, yeah,
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm tracking with you, Alina. I appreciate that. I'm looking at this clock here, Des, and I know that I could do this conversation for another hour, and I'm incredibly grateful for everybody got on. And what I heard Alina say there was, we're humans, we're not numbers, right? And that when we see each other as people in need of restoration, people who walk through life and make mistakes and benefit from forgiveness, need forgiveness, give other people forgiveness, that when we can see and ask real fundamental questions like who benefits from this decision, I think that we're starting to put ourselves on the right path. What do you think, Des?
I think Norris asked that question was powerful, and it reminded me of when I started my journey here in Florida and talking to people about felon disenfranchisement. And, I had to eventually shift my question to that very same question that Norris asked. And I started asking people, listen, who benefits from people like me having a hard time finding a job, finding a housing, getting an education? Who benefits from me struggling? It's definitely not the public, right? The public don't benefit. The only people, and then when we started looking at who benefits, then we started looking at the private prisons. We started looking at corporations that do business with prisons that, like the telephone
That's right.
scam. That we're definitely going to bring Bianca Tylick on to talk about that, because she's done amazing work in the northern part of the country on it. But we start seeing that the people who have the power to change the conditions does not benefit from us being in those bad conditions.
No, that's
right.
One of the things is too, Dad, I heard while I was still inside, man, I listened to a sermon. It was a pastor out of Chicago named James Meeks. And he did this sermon around, do we have bad boys or we have a bad system? Mm-hmm. And when he details inside that sermon how these little one-horse towns, one red light, all of a sudden they build a prison inside these communities. And when they build a prison, what they have to do? They have to pave the road. What's the next thing happen? When people start building, they have a 7-Eleven, a convenience store. Next thing you know, they prop down a hotel. And so people's economic development comes on the backs of other people who can least afford it. It's like our hardship becomes their economic development. And so, I always tell people in that same question is that, do we have bad boys or do we have a bad system? And I would venture to say that we actually have a bad system because people are profiting off the misery of other people. Yeah. And that shouldn't happen.
Yeah,
that shouldn't happen.
We see that here in Florida, Norris. We just saw it last couple months ago when there was this conversation about, shutting some prisons down. And you see people use language about prisons that sound very much like beaches, right? It's like, hey, that's our economic development. You can't take that away from the community. Wow. And it's just like, wow, we have come a long way to end up in this place where we have incentives for people to profit off of their pain, right? And then to even create incentives to find reasons to put people into those prisons. Man, Des, today has been good.
Yeah, well, listen, it has. Alina, listen, let me tell you, just know that you are in our prayers. And not only are you in our prayers, but there are people like Norris and so many other folks, man, that's even part of a broader network, FICPFM, that's out there across the country that's fighting for you, Alina. And just know that.
I know.
That you're not alone. And we're going to keep pushing this administration. We're going to keep pushing our policymakers and elected officials to shift how they're thinking about people with felony convictions. But I want to just thank you so much for at least coming on and just really sharing some of your story and your fears with us. It's amazing. It's amazing. And just know that, no matter what happens, that you have a community out here that is fighting for change.
Yeah, and I'd just like to doubly thank you as well and back up what Desmond was saying. Your story has power. Your everything that you're doing has meaning, and we're really grateful for you having the courage to step into this. We do have an advocacy toolkit that I know we'll be sharing with the folks who are taking part in the podcast to make sure that it's like, if you're hearing this right now and you're like, oh my gosh, I cannot stand by and let this kind of immoral activity take place, I want to get involved. We'll have a whole toolkit for y'all to get plugged in.
And make sure, man, that you all tell your friends and your family to download the Fireside Chat app.
Fireside.
Right? You've got to download that app. I'm telling you, listen, our shows is only going to get better, right? You know, I'm telling you, it's only going to get better. This is our second show in the books, right? And listen, we started out with a bang, right?
That's
and then we got Alina, then we got superstar Norris on there. You know, Norris got to come back. Norris, you going to come back?
Please.
Whenever you want me, bro. Bring it back when you have Stan on there, bro.
Hey.
When you bring Stan back.
Yeah,
bring
listen.
Stan on, bring
You are not allowed to be within 50 yards of any paintball guns. I'll tell you that right now. You know, you're not.
Are you not entertained, Norris? That's a line we'll always remember.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Norris.
That was fun. No, thank y'all guys.
Thank you so much, man. You have a great one.
Take care, y'all.
And give our love to your family.
I will. Matter of fact, my wife told me to tell you and Sheena hello while I was on the call with y'all.
All right, most definitely. Well, listen, thank everybody for joining our voice, because that's what this is about, our voice. You got to hear some amazing stories, some heart-wrenching stories, and you got to hear about how we, people who have been impacted by the justice system, have the power to change the conditions, right, that's been beating us down for years. You heard an example from my homeboy Norris and how they was able to flex, right, and elect judges. We could do this in Florida. We could do this in any state across the country. We have that power to change our conditions. Let's make our voices heard. We're doing it with the podcast. You can do it with your vote.
Come on. Thank you so much, Jess. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Peace.
Thank you, Alina. Peace.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right.